Welcome to Creative Conversations. I'm Roger Humphrey. In this episode, I'm pleased to welcome the newest member of the award-winning Cassatt String Quartet, Violist Emily Brandenburg. Please join us as we talk about her journey in joining the quartet, playing music new and old, teaching, and so much more. Before we begin, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. That simple act goes a long way to helping the channel. Thanks. And we are welcoming to the show Emily Brandenburg, the newest member of the Cassatt String Quartet, viola player. I'll probably be the last person to congratulate you for.
Well, thank you. It's still an honor, so anytime.
You're in with an august group of women. So they've been together for 40 years, and you obviously...
I'm not yet the age of 40, so yes.
So anyway, it's a wonderful group. I had the privilege of having Jennifer Leschnauer on the program recently, and who plays second violin, of course. And it's just a terrific group. I am... a huge fan of chamber music in general. That's probably my favorite. I'm a guitar guy, and I've played recitals and concerts before. But I tell people I was like, okay, it was a nice summer afternoon, but the work that I've done in chamber music, I've been proud of. It's just it's a different kind of playing, and the demands are completely different.
Right.
And I really like it. Is that something that you prefer, as chamber?
So over the years, yeah, chamber music has always been something that's really drawn me in. I really love kind of the intimate connection of the players, really sharing your ideas, one-on-one. Sometimes the struggle of figuring out, a compromise is actually really fun and enjoyable, hearing other people's ideas and growing through that aspect. So yeah, chamber music has been something I've always loved. And my dream was always to join a full-time string quartet. So when the Cassatts came around and asked me to audition, I was elated. This was not the first string quartet I had played in, but it had been a few years since I was in my previous quartet. And yeah, this is something that's just always been part of my soul.
So I got a couple of questions along those lines. Sure. First off, what was the audition process like?
Well, my journey with the quartet and the audition process was long. It was over time. I was actually supposed to sub with them, think about this, maybe in 2022, because their violist at the time wasn't able to play with them that summer. They invited me to come and play. I agreed. Unfortunately, I had a family emergency, had to back out, and I was just so upset about it. And then years later, they were asking me to do things, and it just never worked out. And then finally, the audition rolled around, and they wrote me an email, asked me to come and play with them. And I, at that time, was newly pregnant with my second daughter. And so being so apprehensive of such an undertaking of even auditioning, I actually very kindly declined their offer. And I got the most thoughtful, genuine email from the quartet that I've ever received. And it said, we understand that this is a lot for you to kind of take in right now, being pregnant for a second time, getting ready to have your second child, but we would still love for you to come and play with us. And if we feel like things are working well and we want to talk about you, formally auditioning and formally joining the group, we can talk about that later, but why don't you just come play with us? And wow. We're going to support you as, a young mom, finding your footing, both being a mom and a musician. And so my journey was a little bit different than probably some of the other people that auditioned for them. So it was just rehearsals. We just rehearsed, and, they were very supportive during my journey of pregnancy, and things clicked. And so they approached me. It was the very end of my pregnancy, and asked me to join and offered to give me maternity leave right up front. And
Wow.
I know it was unlike, any other situation I had ever been in. It was just so supportive and, like I said, so genuine. And they just really wanted to be there for me, and they wanted me to be part of a group. And so they made that happen.
That's terrific. That speaks well of the individuals as well as the group as an enterprise.
Yes.
So how what's that balancing act like between home life and professional life? It's got to be a little tricky at times.
It's a little tricky at times, and we work it out. My husband is also a musician, and so he has his own career. So we're constantly juggling our work lives and home life and babysitters and yeah, moving rehearsals around. The quartet's great. Sometimes they come and rehearse at my home, so that I'm close with my children. It's tough. I'm not going to say it's not tough, but it's worth it. And yeah, you figure it out as you move along.
I spoke to my son years and years and years ago. He was, gosh, I don't know, probably about 30 at the time, I guess, and I kind of apologized to him because I'm a teacher and a performer, and gone afternoons and nights,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and weekends, and all that kind of stuff. And so I just kind of apologized to him for not being around. He says, didn't even think about it. He said, that was just life in our family. I mean, so it was for me. I always felt guilty, but he kind of pulled that guilt away from me. He says, that's just life under our roof, no problem.
That's very sweet and kind of him. That's
Well, yeah, at a time, when it's not uncommon for kids to blame every little problem that they have on parents not being there, kind of thing. So I kind of had that guilt kind of weighing me down. So I got away with it anyway.
Oh. Well, mine are very little. Mine are 10 months and 2 years old. So, right now they just know this life. This is life. And when they see me leave, my oldest son, who's 2, says, "Mom, you play your viola?" I was like, "Yes, I'm going to go play my viola." So, so.
So how did you, well, I guess the other question I have is how is this quartet, how do they differ from your previous quartets?
Well, my previous quartet was an ensemble based at a university in Indiana. And we were all pretty young, pretty fresh out of school. And I think it was a really wonderful experience because everyone was just so go get 'em, and just riding high from being in school and not necessarily feeling the weight and gravity of being a full-time professional musician, if that makes sense. I mean, the Cassatt Quartet is stable. They have amazing relationships with composers, presenters, foundations. I think that's the major difference. Is my previous quartet was just kind of just playing some concerts at a university once in a while, doing a few, small community events. But the Cassatt Quartet kind of like I've walked into kind of a legacy, all these people they know. And I mean, it's a little overwhelming. The first few rehearsals I played with them, I'd hear about like, oh, we work with this composer and that composer. And I was like, wow, these are all people that I like love and admire so much, and to come to find out they're very close friends with people in the quartet. So that's the big difference. It's that the quartet, the Cassatt Quartet has a legacy. It has relationships with so many amazing people, just composers and, like I said, foundations, presenters. And so that's the biggest difference. They're just very established.
Well, I know that the quartet kind of balances between new music and standard repertoire. Does that kind of hit you right on all your buttons too?
It does. It does. I love new music. I love working with composers. That's probably one of my most favorite things to do. But who doesn't like playing a Beethoven quartet or some Mozart? I mean, you can't dislike those things as a string quartet musician. But yeah, we're really looking forward to our 40th season and commissioning. We've commissioned, or people are writing quartets or different pieces for us. So we're really excited about that for next year.
That's wonderful. I know that Gerald Cohen was on recently, and just he's a marvelous composer, and just really, I really love his music a lot. So, as well as being a heck of a nice guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I know you are or have done some of his music. So,
the quartet, yeah, I think the quartet has. I have not personally done that, but
okay.
But I think the quartet as a whole has. Yeah.
So, I've worked with two violists, I think, maybe three over the years. Just pick up things, nothing like what you're doing here, and my overall feeling, my recollection is that I really enjoyed the people, number one, because that's why I did it, was for the people. But sitting next to the instrument was nice. It was I love the instrument probably more than if you had said something to me 40 years ago, I probably would have just shrugged my shoulders and go, okay, But after really having the time to listen to one, and I will tell you, when you're sitting downwind from some of these instruments, it makes a difference. And I've always thought that there's just something really rich and at times melancholy, although it doesn't have to be, about the viola. What was your first attraction to the instrument?
Well, I have actually not always been a violist. So I was a violinist up through my undergrad. I went to school for undergrad as a violinist, and during my undergrad, the school I went to kind of had a shortage of violas. I went to a very small string school. And so they came to me and asked me if I would be willing to play viola in some chamber music. I was like, okay. I was like, sure. I don't know how to play the instrument. I don't know how to read the clef, but sure. So they gave me the instrument, handed me my music, and said, you have 1 week until your first coaching with Larry Dutton from the Emerson Quartet. And I was like,
wow.
Okay. All right. So I remember going to my college dorm and sitting on the floor and being like, okay, how do I read this clef? How do I play this instrument? Right.
Trial by fire.
Yes, exactly. I was so nervous, but he was very supportive in that first coaching. Anyway, so from there, it really, throughout that semester of chamber music that I played viola, it became very apparent that I was finding my voice as a musician on the viola. And I think everybody around it saw it happening sooner than I did. And so I knew I really loved playing the viola, but I had not considered changing my major. I had not considered any of these things yet. And then, yeah, I actually had some faculty members at that school approach me and say, hey, we think you should consider playing the viola full time. Like, you're a good violinist, but we think you have a really special voice on the viola. And so that's kind of how my journey began on the viola. And then from there, it was just very apparent that that was my calling, and that is what I was always meant to do.
Well, you had so much invested in the violin. That must have been mentally a tough, a real challenge to kind of come to that conclusion yourself.
It was, but at the same time, I had a real peace over it. It actually wasn't that much of a struggle for me because I had always loved viola repertoire, right? So this goes back to kind of my love of new music, or even new music and quartets. Most viola repertoire is much newer than what most people play on violin, right? At least in school, kind of the standards. And so that's the music that I loved. All my friends were playing it as violists, and I was like, man, I love Bartok Concerto. I love Schnicke. I love, Penderecki Concerto, all of these things. And so when I switched, it was like everything felt so much more comfortable for me.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
cool.
Which is not, I don't know. So I didn't really grieve
Uh-huh.
not playing the violin anymore, if that makes sense.
That's yeah, it makes a lot of sense, right? If you have a if you're deeply invested in something emotionally, it's hard to make that switch, even though it's probably the most logical, most realistic thing you could do. So that's terrific. I don't know if you're familiar with the violist Miles Hoffman. I don't know. Do you know that name or not?
I don't think so.
Okay, he was with the National Symphony for many years under Rostropovich, and went on to start the American Chamber Orchestra, I believe. I had the joy, privilege of meeting him and seeing him in a private recital, lots of years ago,
Yeah.
and just a treat to watch somebody who's got it mastered, and just doing solo viola. I mean, there's no accompaniment, just unaccompanied solo viola, and the college that I was teaching at that time had a recital hall, and this wasn't a repurposed storeroom. This was literally a purpose-built recital hall. The stage was almost looked like Carnegie in miniature, and it just the acoustics were beautiful, and the seating was like 115.
That's nice.
So you could play pianissimo and lob those notes off that back wall all afternoon, and it was
That's nice.
and to sit there and listen to him. He'd come and played for us, and to sit there and listen to him with a little noontime recital. Wow, it was just a real magical treat. I think I probably came to love the instrument. I'd always appreciated it prior to that, but that's when I came to love the instrument, just the richness of the tone. Because I don't think I'd ever really, when you really get somebody who's really really good at it, it's
Yeah.
a beautiful instrument. So
It is.
so do you have solo projects coming up, or does the Cassatt pretty well keep you busy?
Well, between Cassatt right now and my two little ones, which are 2 and under, I'm pretty busy. I was talking to my husband recently about an idea for a solo project, but I'm not sure how feasible that is in the next few months or year. So we'll have to see. But down the line, definitely going to get back to doing some solo projects.
So, and you also teach,
I do.
right? Now, I noticed I was reading your bio, and I noticed that you're Suzuki certified. Are you teaching Suzuki at this time?
So right now, the school that I'm teaching at is not a Suzuki school.
Okay.
But a lot of my, like the foundation, the way I teach is based on Suzuki principles, and using the Suzuki books. So no, it's not full Suzuki, but I just feel like there's so much value to that method and the ideas and the way that it was kind of formed, that it's just a really helpful tool to begin with when you're teaching a student. So I was a Suzuki student from the age of, goodness, I started like pre-Suzuki classes when I was 3. And
Uh-huh.
that's just a huge part of who I am. And so getting certification and basing my teaching on those principles was kind of a no-brainer.
I was approached oh golly, years ago when I still had hair on top of my head. I had a father of a young boy, excuse me, come to me, and the child was 5, and he wanted me to teach his kid how to play guitar. And I said no, because I just didn't have any experience at all in teaching at that age group.
Right.
And so, but he talked me into it. And so I said, well, okay, with the caveat that if it doesn't work, you blame me. It's got to be on me. Can't blame your child. So he said, okay. And it did not work out, unfortunately. But I learned a lot of. Well, I learned how dumb I was, I think.
Now, yeah.
But there were no methods. The guitar methods that I saw at that time, that were for young children, were really not. They were written for kids 10 or 12 years old, but they just had cooler cartoons in them. And but the way the music was presented, I mean, you have one page of music symbols at the very beginning. It's page, the next page is like ready, set, go, and here's some notes and play them. It's like, wow, it's like drinking from a fire hose.
Right.
And so and there was no Suzuki for guitar at that time. It just didn't
Right.
exist. So
Right.
I set upon myself to read. I read Nurtured with Love, and
Yeah.
and a bunch of other stuff, and started to understand the principles behind it. And I wrote a method. It was okay. Wrote another one. It's worked a lot better, and I've
Yeah,
had good success with it. Now, since then, there is a Suzuki method
there
for
is. Yeah.
guitar, and
Yep.
you know, and they've been very successful with it, and I congratulate them on that. But at that time, you know,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
not not so much. So
Yeah.
anyway, but it's a wonderful system. One of the other things that I've run into is for younger children. I'm thinking of your kids, for example, and some of the music and motion programs, and just these general music programs for children that I'm a huge fan. I get some of these kids that started with some of these programs when they were 1, and they come to me when they're 6, practically fully formed. I mean, it's they understand rhythm, they understand pitch, they understand. I mean, all of it. So
Right, right. Well, because all of these things, right? Rhythm, pitch, right? They're all things that are equivalent to language and how children, this is
sure.
all about Suzuki, right? About how they learn how to speak. And so, um, even with my son, he loves music. He loves rhythm, right? We're not being like, you have to be a musician, right? But we sing songs in our house. It's just like part of what we do. And so he loves to sing it too. He pitch matches, right?
That's amazing too.
He rhythm whenever he hears a rhythm. It's kind of funny. Our espresso maker makes a sound when it's making our espresso, right? And he claps along with the rhythm, right? It's really funny, but it's interesting to see how kids just pick up these things that are happening around them, right? And they don't think of them as playing music, right? But it all kind of comes together, if you
Right.
were to start playing an instrument. Um, and so, yeah, so my little students I teach that are 4, 5, 6, they're not reading music. They're purely learning to play by ear, building that basic foundation. It's so important that sometimes if they start to learn to read too early, it can actually like inhibit their growth in that area, at least in my opinion. Um,
That's kind of my feeling too. And,
yeah,
and and with the guitar, one of the problems we have is that a lot of teachers want to teach the kids how to play chords right out of the box, and it's too abstract.
yeah,
They want Mary Had a Little Lamb to sound like Mary Had a Little Lamb. They want to hear that melody, and just
right,
strumming it and singing it. It's
right.
just far too abstract for a child like that. And so I've had people for 40 years telling me that children that young can't learn, and I've been proving them wrong for 40 years. So,
Yeah.
so
But
and I'm very, very, very happy about that. So what's on your music stand these days?
Well, right now the quartet is rehearsing a piece by Jesse Montgomery called Strum. It's this really wonderful short 7-minute work, um, very rhythmic and kind of very groovy. So we're working on finding this whole groove as a quartet. So we're working on that. We're working on Mozart 428, which is new for me. It's a piece I've never played before. So that's really exciting. Then our one of the largest works we're carrying this season is Shostakovich 14, which is just a massive string quartet that is hardly played. It's probably one of the least played Shostakovich quartets. It was written for the cellist of the Beethoven Quartet, who that quartet premiered most of Shostakovich's quartets. And so this quartet was written for him. So the cellist is a huge feature in this quartet. With that said, there's some pretty amazing viola solos as well. It's a very unusual quartet. So I think the bottom roles, so cello and viola, really take a prominent feature in this quartet, which is pretty cool in my opinion. And yeah, what else are we playing? We're getting ready to play Puccini Crisantemi coming up here in a little bit, and yeah, just a slew of things. We got 5 or 6 things that we're carrying, and always looking for something new.
So your concert season will extend into May.
Yes, yes, yes. We have a concert at SUNY Purchase coming up the beginning of April. We're playing a concert at Treetops Chamber Music Society shortly after that. Um, and then the quartet does a lot of community concerts. That's a large portion of what we do. We get some grants through various foundations to support that work. And so we go into schools and, retirement homes or just kind of at venues where maybe music isn't very prevalent. And yeah, we share our seasons, work with them in a very approachable way. So even for school children or even in a retirement home or a memory care unit, we're still playing Shostakovich and we're still playing, Mozart and Jesse Montgomery. We're presenting it in a way that is approachable for everyone to understand. So
When my kids and my grandkids were still in elementary school, I used to go to the elementary school and give programs, and we just get all the kids. They separated the kids into two groups. They would have like K through second grade and third, fourth, and fifth grade for the other group, but they'd bring them into their gymnasium, cafetorium, whatever they call it,
yeah.
and the kids would just sit on the floor, and I would not dumb it down. I absolutely did not dumb it down. I played. Uh, I, I say didn't dumb it down. I mean, I did to some extent. For example, I would play the opening part of Fury Elise because it's recognizable and it's also very relatable.
Right.
But I didn't play the entire piece because but I did play that, and I also there's a Bourrée. It's actually something I still play after almost 50 years. It's from Bach's First Lute Suite, and it was the reason I wanted to get involved in classical guitar. I was a folkie before that, and and I would it's just a short little piece, and it's almost a perfect example of two-part counterpoint. It's just textbook on how to write counterpoint in two voices. So I would tell the kids part of it is just teaching them how to listen. And I would say, if you listen to this closely, it sounds like two people playing at the same time. And I would have seriously first graders sitting there just like that, and the teachers were more surprised because you get kindergartners, first graders, and second graders, and the only thing you heard in that room was the guitar.
Right.
And of course they're expecting just this terrible, children being children, but kids gravitate towards that. And you don't have to, and it's the same with I think adults too. That if you give it to them straight, I remember seeing a college orchestra had come to our high school, and I grew up in basically it was a classical music desert. I mean, there just wasn't anything there. Certainly no string programs of any kind. And I live in Michigan. It was Michigan State University. Their orchestra came and gave a program for our school, and it was a nice program. The harpist was going to do a solo. They had full-on harp there, so it's cool. I'd seen a harp in the movies, but I'd never seen one up close, or not
Right.
up close. I mean, live. So I was really excited. And she played, when it was her turn to play a solo piece, she played Turkey in the Straw. And I was so disappointed. I mean, I cannot begin to tell you how disappointed. Like, that's the best you got is Turkey in the Straw? Is there nothing else? I mean, I didn't even know the names of the composers at that time, but I knew there was something better than that. And I just really felt cheated, So I think, so when we do these programs, I thought, I remember that so clearly. So I'm sit down with a second grader, third grader, fourth grader, and I just, no nonsense. This is it, kids. This is what it sounds like. I play Renaissance music and Baroque and and all kinds of stuff, and they just absolutely loved it.
Right. Great. Yeah. I like you said, I think children are much more capable of listening and understanding than sometimes adults will give them credit for.
Yeah,
And so, yes, of course, they love to hear, the theme from Frozen or like the Bluey theme song or,
sure.
I mean, whatever. I think that's great so that they can, that's approachable for them. But at the same time, we have found, even playing Shostakovich for these little kids, that they come up with these very vivid stories or emotions because we often ask them, like, how did you feel? How did the music make you feel? And I've just been shocked more often than not, kind of what comes out of their mouth and how it made them feel and affected them. And it's not far off from probably what Shostakovich intended, which is very interesting. So.
It's great. You look at these kids, you say 1 minute they're eating paste and flicking boogers, and the next thing they're coming up with these amazing questions and insight, and you just wait a minute. It's such a contrast. It's funny. So, well, Emily, you know what? This was so much fun, and we've kind of hit the end of our rope here a little bit. So I'm going to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to hang out with me here and do this.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, I'm going to say goodbye for now. Hopefully we'll get you back on the show one of these days soon. And it'll be fun to see how things are going and all that kind of stuff. So I wish you a very, very happy career between now and then.
Thank you so much.
I want to thank Emily for taking the time to come on the show. And I want to thank you too for listening. If you would like to know more about the Cassatt Quartet, there is a link to their website in the description. If you would like to get updates on Emily, the Cassatt, or any of my previous guests, then I've got some good news for you. I have a weekly blog that does just that. Go to www.rogerhumphrey.com and then hit the blog tab at the top of the page. And if you subscribe, I promise, no spam. Thanks again for your support. I hope you come back again real soon and listen to even more episodes of Creative Conversations with Roger Humphrey.